You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku, and this is another Shoot the Breeze episode. This is an episode where me and you guys talk about various topics of interest that you guys have. It's an opportunity for me to learn about some stuff that I didn't know anything about before. So, and it's an opportunity for you all to learn things that you didn't know before, right? So it's a collective kind of hang out, learn, shoot the breeze type thing. Before I get into the show, I want to remind you guys that this show is a part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. You guys should be tuning in to some of the other shows.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure you guys check out those shows as well as the Revolutionary Matron show. I see in the chat room we got the Pro-Black Perspective is here saying peace, fam. Peace to you too, brother. Good to see you. Good to see everyone who's here. Make sure you guys hit the like button as well. For a small channel like this one, the like button is really important. So make sure you guys hit the like button as well. Come on in. If you're live with me right now, come on in, post some topics. I didn't get a lot of topics for the Shoot the Breeze this week. I guess people aren't too assimilated to the idea that I'm back podcasting again. So we didn't get many Shoot the Breeze topics this week, but it's all good. Once again, you guys check out the Pro-Black Perspective, the Harsh Reality Podcast, and the Revolutionary Matron show. All right. Speaking of Revolutionary Matron says, greetings, fam. All right. Peace to all of you. Thanks for being here. All right. Revolutionary Matron actually posted a Shoot the Breeze topic. The Pro-Black Perspective posted one some weeks back, and we could talk about that again today, too. Especially since that they're both here. All right. If you're not familiar, in the description of this video, there's a link to the Bitter Medicine Podcast Discord. You could join our Discord server. We have different initiatives that we're pushing, including the Pan-African or African-centered curriculum. Just join up. Let us know you want to help. And there are others as well. Just join the Discord, ask us what are all the initiatives, and I'll let you know. All right. So the first topic on the Discord, I'm going to go back to the Only to Say talk. It's been a few weeks. I kind of forgot. What it was all about, but the Pro-Black Perspective, Only to Say, had a question of the day a couple weeks back, and it actually mentions myself. This podcast, it says Bitter Meds yesterday read a paper on Yoruba marriages that related how traditionally a woman's family and relationship to her family are important factors in marriageability. That said, is a woman who hates her father for being abusive to her mother marriage material? Now, this is a multiple choice question. A is no, she hates her father. B is no, her father is abusive. C is yes, she hates an abuser. D, this shouldn't factor. All right, so I'm going to read the prompt again, and I'll read the multiple choices you could choose from. All right. Question of the day: Bitter Meds yesterday read a paper on Yoruba marriages that related how traditionally a woman's family and relationship to her family are important factors in marriageability. That said, is a woman who hates her father for being abusive to her mother marriage material? Why? And the four options are: A, no, she hates her father. B, no, her father is abusive. C, yes, she hates an abuser. D, this shouldn't factor. Very curious to see what you guys will say. We also have the pro-black perspective here live with us. So he could definitely, Onita can definitely kind of speak to this question of the day. What are your thoughts? Those of you who are live with me today, what are your thoughts on this prompt? So yes, it's true that I did read this paper on Yoruba marriages, and it was an interesting conversation. In fact, someone I know reached out to me recently to have a conversation about some of the things we discussed during that reading, like body counts and parents choosing spouses, etc. And it just shows how, these papers are good conversation pieces. They open our minds to information that we probably didn't know, especially analyses that we probably never considered. But that's something that I had to dig within myself recently and ask, like, would I trust my parents? And immediately my mind was like, hell no. To choose my wife? No. Hell no. But it's an interesting question. All right? If a woman who hates her father for being abusive to her mother, is she marriage material? Right? Her father was a scumbag, right? Abusing her mother, so she doesn't like him. Right? So she doesn't like him. Is she marriage material? Well, me personally, my outlook on this question is, unless I'm out here looking to abuse women or something like that, then it shouldn't be a problem. She hates abuse. Am I an abuser? No. In the chat room, the revolutionary matron chose D. This shouldn't factor. She says we should not establish ways of being for relationships at this time. We should work diligently to establish a new community so that the next generation can be healthy. So she felt like it didn't factor. What says the rest of you? Onitase is here in the room. What was your response to your question of the day? I see Oni posted a topic too. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. The pro-black perspective posted, and it's interesting because, in part, because I saw the headline. I saw the headline, but I didn't really look into the story. And a part of that has to do with, and a part of that is probably what they want, which is we are so inundated with these killings that sometimes I'm not particularly in the mood to read the details, right? The pro-black perspective is answering that question that he asks, and he has an interesting take on it. Which is it's actually a smart take too. He says, usually a woman who hates her father will hate men in general, take it out on her spouse. You know, it's funny, if you follow me on Twitter, my handle is BITTERMEDZ, Bitter Meds, and I reposted recently I think it's a sister, right? I reposted this sister, and D-Web from the Harsh Reality podcast actually jumped on it. Because once I see the ignorance of something, I don't really waste my time commenting. But this sister, I assume, took this stance of black men are 7% of the population, do 50% of the crime. Other races who also have access to guns kill at that rate, the country will be annihilated. Of course, I said some of our people are mental. That was my retweet comment. And then this person says to me, stats bothering you, criminal degenerate? And at that moment, you guys can go on my Twitter and see the rest of the thread. Because D-Web jumps in after from the Harsh Reality podcast. And you could tell that this sister just doesn't like men to begin with. If you go to her page, to her Twitter page, you can see that in general, right? Like in her tagline, she says, gender ideology is male violence, right? One of her early tweets, I think it's a pinned tweet, says, burn patriarchy. Have girls by artificial insemination. So this person just doesn't like men and sounds like she particularly doesn't like black men. And I wonder where that comes from, right? Likely it comes from something that a man close to her, perhaps a family member, had done. Right, so that goes to what the pro-black perspective was saying. Usually a woman who hates her father, or you could change it to who hates men, some male family member will hate men in general, right? And take it out on her spouse. What I will say to that too, and that's a valid statement from the pro-black perspective. What I would say to that too is that oftentimes a lot of that stuff is just an immaturity. The inability to differentiate, right? And that's something I would remind men and women, be able to differentiate. Like, for example, and I know this comes up every show, but one of the problems we have with the ADOS, FBA, the diaspora wars we see just about every damn day on social media, is that there's folks out here who are not able to discern that one or two people doesn't equal the whole, right? You may have had a bad experience with a person, but there are other people out there who are not the same, who are better. Your father might be garbage, but there's other men out there who aren't garbage. Same thing, your mother might be garbage. There's women out there who now you can be skeptical, but you should be mature enough to kind of give people that chance before you blanketly condemn them, right? In the chat room, the pro-black perspective also said, if her family is abusive, it's probable for her to have learned the abuse to herself, be abusive too, in so much as we should judge by family. Excellent point. I remember as a kid, do you guys remember these commercials that had like, it was some white folks too, that had like the little white boy up on the second floor listening to his father pummel the mom or something like that, and they then hit you with abuses or learned behavior. So there is that possibility. I can't deny that whatsoever. I do say that folks do need to learn to discern a little bit. Have your guard up, give folks a chance, see that they're different, act accordingly, right? But I love the question, and I definitely love the responses from the pro-black perspective. Pro-black perspective says, yeah, there's a psychological toll on children of abusive parents. It's a forewarning. It goes on to say, the question comes from judging people by their family. Tough to do, but it was what was in the reading on how marriages were chosen. Absolutely. And then the pro-black perspective posts a quote that I like to use to hurt people do in fact hurt people. So that was a good question. It actually makes you think about the logic that our ancestors had, right? It's an interesting thing. And now the question I would ask, and I want to see what you guys think. You guys in the chat room, I think all of you were there when I read that paper. Do you think if a family finds out that the father was indeed abusive to the mother, do you think the father would, do you think the parents doing the investigation would cancel that family? Do you think they will cancel that family most of the time, or most times not? Right? KW Don 7 is in the room. Shout out to KW Don 7. He says there was never a successful matriarchy in history of the world. So good luck with destroying patriarchy. Yeah. Revolutionary Matron says hurting people hurt people. We need to decide to help heal our people, which is why we have to create a community away from the toxicity so that they can be whole. Matron goes on to say if we throw away all the broken people, we will not have a people to rebuild a community. Yeah, that's an interesting concept, one that I believe in as well, and it actually there's some other topics that you can view that way as well. If we start to X out or cross out those who are hurt, broken, right? If we cancel out those who are hurt, broken, those who are asleep, those who are unmindful, we would have no one to build the nation that we need. Pro-black perspective says it sounds like they would cancel. But abuse is common in diaspora, so it's hard to apply the same rules. Right. The truth of the matter, well, I should not say that publicly, so I won't say that. But there are certain norms that you would find in the diaspora that you couldn't apply the same rules to as the pro-black perspective just said, right? There's certain norms. That's the one term I want to add to what he said. There's certain quote-unquote norms that go down that changes how rules are applied and how rules are upheld, right? I'll put it like that. The pro-black perspective agrees with Revolutionary Matron, so many broken people. Absolutely. Matron says if the family found out, I think they would weigh the economic benefits for themselves, and unfortunately, they make her stay. Very possible. We got to be honest about it. Remember, these rituals aren't about some emotional stuff too. There's a benefit type thing, and so if the benefit is high enough, what happens to the rules? Or what happens to logic, right? Revolution Matron says, I'm doing a talk tomorrow about Proverbs 31 at 2 p.m. No matter what, we are all responsible for each other. So you guys make sure to tune into Revolutionary Matron. Make sure to subscribe to her YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to the pro-black perspective. And don't just subscribe. Actually go and listen to what they're putting down. And I think you'll enjoy it, right? I was in, I'm usually, these days, I'm usually a lurker. I was on the Pro-Black Perspectives live last Sunday. So I saw Revolutionary Matron, I'm a Bookman, etc. there last time. And it's a nice time. If you tune into any of these KWAZ radio shows, you'll see it's a nice time, and it's even nicer when you guys are in the chat room corresponding with the presenter, all right, or presenters, all right. The pro-black perspective says, reminds me how I was making fun of the Southern girl about how South has a lot of incest. She told me to stop with those jokes, but later showed me a picture of two cousins dating. Oh boy. Revolution Matron says ball players do horrible things to women, and money consciousness versus community consciousness. Money consciousness always wins. Pro-black perspective says, I think incest was pretty common in some areas. I'd say no marrying into those families, though I guess they marry into themselves, so I wouldn't qualify. Right? Pro-black perspective asked a very good question to the Revolution Matron. Will it be a live show tomorrow at 2 p.m.? I'd like to hear the answer to that too. It'll be cool if it's a live show. You guys mess with myself, this show and the Pro-black perspective. Make sure you guys tune in to the Revolutionary Matron tomorrow. By the way, the Revolutionary Matron was on the Pro-black perspective, I think 2 Saturdays ago. Real tight, real dope conversation. You should check it out. I don't even want to spoil it. You should go ahead and check it out. So yeah, so is there any other thing you guys want to add to this topic? I think Pro-black perspective came through nicely with the explanation. Or what would be his response to that same question? I gave mine without considering. I answered the question without considering how hurt people. But I do believe that, again, folks, I'll sympathize with hurt people, but I want hurt people to learn how to discern, right? Those who hurt and those who don't. All right. So that was a good one. I appreciate that. Going back up, Pro-black perspective had explained something to me. He said the story. So at first the topic was the father who was killed by his 14-year-old daughter's 17-year-old boyfriend after a shootout between the two after he was being escorted out. Wow, is that really what that story was? You know, silly me, I thought from the little title I saw, I had the impression that the father, that the daughter did something stupid, the father took it serious, and that someone killed him by accident. I didn't realize it was a shootout between these two folks. The pro-black perspective goes on to explain the story was that the father changed residence because the boy climbed up the building with a ladder. He caught the boy at the new residence during the sin. Da. So that is wild. So the father hold on, let me look up something. So the father was living in a place with his daughter. Caught this kid with a ladder, no less, climbing into his house. If I'm understanding this correctly. He changed residence. I guess maybe in part because of what was going on. He changed residence, only to find the kid doing it again. So the part I'm unclear about, I guess he caught the kid in his house and escorted the kid out of his house, and then a shootout ensued. Is that correct? Found the kid again in his house, escorted him out, and then a shootout occurs where the boyfriend kills the father. Did I put that story together correctly? You guys let me know. While I wait for you guys to answer that question, I'll say this. If you haven't already, if you weren't there, go and tune into the last episode that I did. The last episode I did, we were talking about Egypt. We were talking specifically about the emergence of law in ancient Egypt, the role of Ma'at. Good conversation. Revolutionary Matron was there. KW Dawn 7 was there. And Zuliism was there as well. And you guys should remember Zuliism. I interviewed him for his directorial debut. Pretty good conversation. You guys should check that out. One of the things I talked about was the laws of Ma'at, or the principles of Ma'at, and how we need to get it to our youth. Because honestly, you look at most of what's going down that involves our people carrying out acts of violence against our own people, a lot of times it's these teenage dudes. We just got to be honest about that. Like I said in the last show, I could be walking and see a bunch of grown men walking towards me. I could literally be seeing 20 grown men walk towards me, and I'm more or less at peace. My guard is up, but I'm more or less at peace. I see that number of 15, 16, 17-year-old kids walking to my guard is up, because I know they can do anything. They don't have principles like we just got to be honest about it. if you're this kid, right, from what I'm understanding in the story, I'm just hearing the details today, pro-black perspective says, yeah, an argument occurred, then a shootout. Like, if you live by the principles or the laws of Ma'at, right? This is why when people talk about a code and then they don't define the code, I can't take you serious, right? Like, what kind of brought up seat? What kind of lack of home training, lack of brought up seat does this kid have to be climbing through this man's window? This man moves, maybe in part, maybe in whole. He moves because he doesn't like the fact that this kid keeps climbing up through his window to try tackle his daughter or tackling his daughter. Like, what kind of home training do you have, number one? And by the way, his daughter is also a problem here too. Based on you know, the Cliff Notes version of this, I have to feel like this kid was obsessed, a little mental. The pro-black perspective. So the girl was a minor at that. She was 13 at the time of the first incident. How old was the kid, by the way? She was 13 at the time of the first incident. How old was he? Please don't. Well, I think he's a teenager, right? Please don't tell me he was older than a teenager. But there's a little mental going on, clearly. And we have to start instilling some principles into these youth. The boy was 17. Right, so they both was young. Okay, the pro-black perspective was putting me on. The boy was 17. She was 13 the first time he did this. And the father didn't like it, which is his right not to like it. That's the father's right not to like it. I'll be honest with you too, with you guys listening. Two underage kids dating is whatever. But when you're about to be a high school graduate, I don't want you around my 13-year-old daughter. That's just the reality of it. Take your 17-year-old ass and go find you some 17, 18, 19-year-old or something like that. Don't mess with my daughter. So I'm just thinking about like even when they know each other from school, what grades are they in? It's so different, right? It's so different. The Revolutionary Matron says, we know that the children have been totally co-opted by our enemy. You look at the character played by child actor Chase Dillon. Many of our children have white minds and eyes in black bodies. Who's Chase Dillon? Look at the character played by Chase Dillon. Let me take a quick look and see who Chase Dillon is. Okay, I'm familiar with that kid's face. He was in the Underground Railroad, First Wives Club, and Little America. Okay, I can't think of what he did in particular on screen, but or what role the matron is referring to. Yeah, I kind of don't want my 13-year-old daughter mixed in with a 17-year-old kid And a part of the principles thing is that if you didn't know better at first, okay. If you didn't know what was right or wrong, okay. But if I tell you, don't bring your ass back around here messing with my underage daughter, that should be the end all to that shit. As an elder, right, or at least as an older to that 17-year-old kid, what I tell you goes. This is my house. Essentially, from what I'm understanding here, this kid killed this man because this man didn't want him in his own house, tackling his own daughter. Right? And the girl has some fault. The young daughter has some fault. You got to respect your pops. And you got to know what kind of assholes you're spending time with. Because let me tell you something, you don't just get into an argument and a gunfight, right? This is some shit he was talking about. In fact, a 13-year-old girl, I wouldn't be surprised if she kind of egged him on. You know, I don't want to put rumors out there, but I'm just saying, going back to when I was those ages, a 13-year-old girl, if she's that hung up on this dude coming through, she might have egged that kid on. KW-7 says getting on code means funding a $7 million museum in the midst of gentrified Los Angeles. I heard about that dumb shit too. For those who don't know, #1 agent Tariq Nasheed is now crowdfunding to create a FBA museum down in South Central LA, right? And it's funny, someone today on Twitter kind of showed how just asinine this dude is, because he posted this, I think it was Dwayne Wong, he posted, Tariq posted this clip of Kwame Ture. As people pointed out to him that Kwame Ture is from Trinidad. And I think Dwayne Wong's point in retweeting it was to say this dude was like a preeminent Pan-Africanist. Right? So Tariq and them don't even know how to keep their thoughts straight. Right? They don't know how to keep their thoughts straight, but I digress. Oh, Daily Affirmations by Pauline is here. Shout out to Daily Affirmations by Pauline. I showed it on the last couple of shows. Daily Affirmation by Pauline wearing the free t-shirt that she won from the Saturday Night Shoot the Breeze. Type 1 of you guys saw that image of her in the t-shirt, and let her know if you did. Let her know how great she looks in that t-shirt, if you don't mind. Daily Affirmations by Pauline said the problem is when kids hear no nowadays, they don't respect it. They have not been taught that no means no. I agree. The pro-black perspective says, just to go back up, the pro-black perspective says the boy should have listened to the father, the girl too, absolutely. Only goes on to say people wondering why she told him the new address. Hey man, this is where we gotta apply our memory. to being youths ourselves, right? Let's keep it real here. This is probably her first boyfriend, first amongst other things. She gonna give up that address now, right? Pro Black Perspective says, yeah, man's lost his life over some dumbness. Absolutely. He says she probably said, my daddy got a gun, and he was like, shit, I got one too. I do too. I agree. Right? Pro Black Perspective says she said her father to die. I mean, that's how you have to look at that. That's how you have to look at that. You remember a couple weeks back, well, months now, I did a show on the African names and the correlation to like the extent of Pan-Africanism. And I talked about that in relation to one Kwame Brown. Now, I don't follow Kwame Brown, but a good friend of mine was telling me something Kwame Brown said. And I have to agree with it. And it's that, and I want us to normalize this with our kids too, especially our daughters. If you are a young girl and you have been assaulted by a man, sexually assaulted by a man or a woman, whatever, I don't want folks to be on this black girl magic, black girls rock, the black woman is God, etc., etc. And when something happens to them, we treat our daughters, our sisters, our moms, whoever, we treat them like they're powerless, and that they don't have, you know, the ability to do anything about what has happened to them. People, if a young girl is sexually assaulted, for example, don't coddle that. Make her go to the authorities. I know it can be difficult. I know the authorities might be assholes. And I know there's a chance that at the end of it, you might not get justice, depending on who the perpetrator is. But you got to do your part and go to whoever the authorities are in your locale. And here's where Kwame Brown comes into. Kwame Brown says, if it's because he was talking about the Charlemagne from the Breakfast Club and his past allegations of assaulting a minor, right? And the minor never went, the minor never pushed it in the legal system, etc. And Kwame Brown made a point. He said, look, if it was my daughter, I'm going to go to my daughter and say, listen, either we go to the authorities, let the authorities handle it, or I'm going to have to handle it. And when I handle it, it'll be me in the court system. It'll be me facing the authority. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer this guy goes and face the authorities, or you want dad to have to go face the authority? And that's nothing but sense. That's nothing but sense. We got to start empowering the minds of these young ladies. So, like, I brought that up out of this circumstance. By the way, the Revolutionary Matron says strong winds and rain, power surges and brownouts, but she's back now, right? Seemingly, she's in and out, right? And I appreciate you letting us know. But yeah, so as a father, right, this is where you have to have the respect of your children. Where you go to your 13-year-old daughter, right? Because in that scenario that I give, most daughters will say, well, I don't want my father to have to go deal with the court system. Let me go and have the perpetrator rightfully caught up in front of the court. right? I love my dad too much for him to be out here in some bullshit, right? So I'm applying this to this topic that Onita say posted. You have to have the respect of your children to the extent where your child wouldn't choose this 17-year-old over you, essentially. What do you guys feel about that? The notion that this 13-year-old kid, probably dickmatized, chose her 17-year-old lover or love interest over her father. KW Don 7 says he is already at $222,000 plus of a, what's that, $1.2 million fixed goal that expires in 25 days. That is impressive, and yeah, I am pocket watching. So KW Don 7 put pocket watching in there, because that's something that Tariq talks about a lot. The thing with scammers don't want accountability. So they will denigrate those who ask for accountability. Give them names and titles, and unfortunately, a lot of our black folks who would follow a Tariq, they love that kind of thing, right? And they will repeat that, forevermore. If you point out something about just begging for money all the time, they'll point out, why are you pocket watching, right? But the real trick is they're not watching the real person and what their pockets are, and what they're doing with their pockets. It's kind of mental, to be honest. But anyway, any last thoughts on that topic? Any last thoughts on that topic concerning the 13-year-old daughter who got her father killed by her 17-year-old boyfriend? Revolutionary Matron says this child, no, first she says this is the behavior of a father, right? I think she was referring to part of my conversation where I was talking about the Kwame Brown quote that I actually liked. She goes on to say, Revolutionary Matron says this child probably has a father that works a lot. I don't know if he is abusive. I choose to believe that her father is working hard to make a life, does not have the time to spend with her. I consider that too, actually. I consider that too, that he might be a working man. But at the same time, for the kid to be coming through on a ladder means that the father's home. But the father wasn't home, he'll just come to the front door, right? So it tells me that the father's home, and this kid is sneaking up into homegirl's room, right? Revolution Major says it's sad that he has lost his daughter trying to make a better life for her, and in turn, lost his life. The father might have just been one of these strict dads who's like, nah, you're 13. What are you talking about, a boyfriend? Right? What are you talking about? And a 17-year-old, and who knows if the father got a whiff of the 17-year-old prior. And as a matter of fact, he did get a whiff because he caught him twice going through his window, right? Or at least in his home. And he probably got a whiff of the kid and was like, nah, not that. And he probably cracked down even harder on her. I mean, and the fact that they moved at some point, right? You have to put that into consideration as well. The pro-black perspective says, yeah, I expect that stuff from white families, not black families, but things are happening. Well, you know the deal. you know the deal. I saw a black woman on Twitter some time back say something like, it's amazing how white women stop even thinking about numbers, right? Or bodies in like 10th grade. Whereas black women are held to a body count well into adulthood. And what that screams is, well, I want to be able to do what these white girls can do, with no repercussions, no judgments, etc. And that's kind of how black folks are. Outside of the conscious community of black folks, most black folks are out here really wondering why they can't be and do the things that they see white folks do. And that's just a reality. Right? And in fact, even within conscious community, there's some black folks whose consciousness is just a black face to whiteness. So in other words, it's just black folks lamenting of how come white folks aren't letting us do what they can do. Right? Daily affirmation by Pauline said she may have talked a bunch of negative stuff about her dad. He felt empowered to act out, including shooting her dad. I mean, that's wild. That's wild that, you know, and of course that's a speculation that you can make. That's wild. We gotta really, again, go back to the last episode I did. We gotta really start to instill some principles into our youth, man. We got to really start to instill some principles into our youth. You know, I saw something on a Vlad interview. There's this black fella, I consider him a sellout coon anyway, named Charleston White. And I consider him that because I once saw him say something along the lines of, when white folks make black folks a slave, I'll be all right because I'm cool with white folks. They ain't gonna make me no slave. Something like that he said. Something to that extent he said. But he was telling a personal story of his youth that landed him in jail. When they were teenagers, him and two other friends robbed and killed a dude. And the thing that stood out in the story, he didn't pull the trigger, one of his friends did. The thing that stood out to me in the story is that he said, we ran off, that man was on the ground bleeding out, we ran off giggling. And it reminded me that a lot of what goes on out here in the streets, not only is it cowardice, but it's immaturity. A lot of these dudes taking lives out here are really giggling, like it's a big joke that you've just ended someone's life. We gotta get to these kids earlier and give them some principles early on. Again, check out the last episode that I did on law in Egypt and Ma'at. We gotta start living lives. And by the way, follow Daily Affirmations by Pauline. She gives affirmations every day. We gotta start living our lives by a code. And the thing about the code is not for everyone. It's not for us to live this code and try to live it with white folks and non-black people. The point of these principles is to live that amongst ourselves. We've got to live that amongst ourselves. We need to respect life. We need to respect possessions, etc. Right? Anyway, That's the last I'll say on that last topic. I appreciate it. I appreciate Onitase for bringing me up to speed on that situation. The next topic that we shall discuss. Was provided by the Revolutionary Matron. And I think it's a very good topic. By the way, I think all the topics were good as well. But this one happened, I think, earlier this week. All right. I'm going to post a topic in the chat. All right. I'm going to post a topic in the chat. I'm going to do a station ID. And on the other side, we'll talk about this topic. The topic is, did I really read that they are letting Israel join the African Union? Are they serious? It's a Revolutionary Matron's topic. She said, did I really read that they are letting Israel join the African Union? Are they serious? Let me take this station ID break. I shall be back on the other side.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure, check out the Harsh Reality Podcast, the Pro-Black Perspective. I'm almost certain there'll be a show tomorrow morning from the Pro-Black Perspective, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think I have that time right. I feel like the Harsh Reality Podcast is cooking up something, so look for something new from them tomorrow night. All right. And also check out the Revolutionary Matron, who's doing a show tomorrow at 2 p.m. She will be in the chat room. We can have discussions with her in the chat during the show. So you guys make sure to check out that show as well. I'm talking and trying to do something at the same time that I won't be able to do, actually. So yeah, the new topic. Did I really just read that they are letting Israel join the African Union? Are they serious? Well, to answer the last question, yes, they are. To answer the first question, hell yes, they did. And, you know, this points to the problem with African leadership. You know, Gaddafi was self-serving. He was an Arab. He was self-serving. But when he was alive, he blocked that play, by the way. And by the way, Palestine is in the African Union as observers. He blocked that play for a lot of years, right? And you know, now he's out of there. Netanyahu for a lot of years was trying to cozy up with the larger African countries, right? Trying to get inside there as observers as well. And our African leadership as it stands is problematic. And it made me think about like Gavi's thinking. Gavi had the thought of like, we got to go and teach these Africans how to be. And at one time, I used to think that was kind of arrogant. But the more I witness this stuff, I'm starting to realize, like, yeah, they need to start having advisors, at least. I think Nkrumah had advisors. If I'm not mistaken, Kwame Ture is one of his advisors, like, as well as W.E.B. Du Bois. Like, they need to start having more advisors, more African nations, so that we could, you know, kind of tell them what not to be doing out here, right? Because that was a shame. And they got the Palestinians in there. And you know what that is about. The bleeding heart African is worried about their oppression. Frankly, I'm not. Right? So this is like the problem that we have. KW Don 7 says Charleston White once wore a t-shirt saying Texas N-word. I do not need to listen to anything else he has to say. I agree with that. I agree with that. But I just wanted to use him as a demo of what we are dealing with out here. Just going back to that last topic real quick. We're dealing with youth out here that just don't get it, man. And they'll take your life or mine's, and it'll be a joke. We gotta start getting to them, you know, much younger. And start getting some principles into them. Revolutionary Matrix says these disrespectful groups do not even believe that Africans are worthy of leading. We have been told that nobody ever came into Africa to do Africans any good. Let me illustrate to y'all just how bad the African thought process is. If you're on Twitter, if you connected to me on Twitter, you would have seen this earlier today. And if you're not connected to me, but you're connected to the pro-black perspective, to Onita Say, and then you would have seen this. Let me see if I could bring this up on screen. I'll admit I wasn't prepared to do this today. But let me see if I can get it up on screen. If not, I'll just read it off. But I'm about to read something an African today is saying. And once you understand what an African today, and he has some Africans agreeing with him, by and a lot of the people disagreeing are people from outside of the continent, right? But once you understand what some of the modern day Africans are saying, and I think this guy is a journalist or a writer or something in his hometown, right? You'll see, oh, why is this not working? You'll see the problem that we have. Okay, this is taking too long, so I'm just gonna read it for you. So someone from Brazil, it seems, put up a post saying, start a problematic discourse. And this African says, being African is not about skin color, genetics, or biology. Being African, hold on. This thing just opened. Let me see if I can pull it up now. All right. Let's see if I can pull this up for you guys. So you look on the screen right now, you'll see what this dude was on. All right, so you can see right here where the Brazilian says someone started a problematic discourse. And then here comes this African saying being African is not about skin color, genetics, or biology. It's about lived experience on the continent. White settlers in Africa are Africans because they are part of the African experience. person of African ancestry that has not lived a day in Africa is not African. This is the mindset that we still have, right? This is the mindset that we still have in the continent, right? That's what this guy said. Let me see if there's some comments. This guy goes on to say, Suzanne Wenger, the Austrian artist, was more African than people who shared biological links with Africa because she lived in Africa, practiced the Yoruba religion, worshipped Yoruba gods. Sounds like she was an observer. Even though she was white, she was more African than a person of Nigerian ancestry that has not experienced anything African. Being African is not a biological construct, it's a social construct. If you've never experienced the African reality, Buhari, Museveni, or completely detached from African reality, your skin color doesn't make you African. As you see, here comes saying, this is spicy, well done. He says one really has to say it. Someone comes and say, this makes sense, right? Now, a couple of people came in and had an issue with it. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is just to show you the African, not every African, but if we have an African like this in leadership, I call him a puff. If we have a puff like this in leadership, imagine what will happen. Every Chinese and a dashiki, every Chinaman and a dashiki will be rated higher than you or I outside of the continent. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? So this guy is talking about some Austrian observer who is more African than you or I who are on this live stream right now. Right? Because she had been there. Right? As Onita Say just said, yeah, they say it's observer status, but it's ridiculous that we have foreigners observing our affairs. Just as it's ridiculous that that Austrian was in Yoruba and all that ocean. What do you think observers do? After they observe, they then what? What has history shown us? They then colonize, they take, they destroy. Right? As KW Don 7 has said here, Israel expels African refugees, and the response of the African Union is to allow them into the Union as observers. You can't make this shit up. You cannot make this shit up. There's Africans getting mistreated on videos and whatnot in Israel and in Palestine, by the way. And you got these folks observing it for what? You got to be skeptical of this stuff. Remember, before they give Israel that land in Palestine there, these guys were looking at Uganda, and I'm like, the audacity, right? But we've seen this audacity from Columbus, right? You show up to a place that has people. It's a nation already thriving. People are living, dying, birthing, hunting, gathering, whatever. And you're gonna put your stamp on that place and claim it in the name of the queen and the king, or I mean, what's really going on in Africa? But then as soon as I ask that question, I remember what's going on in Africa. Right? According to Tosin, being African is not about skin color, genetics, or biology. let me pull up, because I commented briefly, but you know me, I'm a snarky type dude. I commented briefly, snarky, and others, like the Pro-Black Perspective, I think Alma Bookman, also comment, right? But there was this one comment that I liked from someone named Don Royce. All right, let's look at Don Royce. Don Royce saw that comment and he said, "This is a horrible take. White settlers who oppressed and continue to oppress Native Africans in their own lands do not have any quote-unquote African experience. They have a European experience in Africa." And they made it pretty clear. And this is a sign he put up showing apartheid, where you go to the right, that's your European hospital. You go to the left, it's your non-European hospital. Which one you think the African had to go to, right or left? Right? And this is the problem. And I have to apologize in thought to Marcus Garvey for the stance that he took. That we have to go back in there and teach these Africans something. It sounds egotistical, but you gotta go. You have to go back and show these guys something. Let me hit the comments. I hope I'm giving my perspective pretty well on this. I see a couple of more people have joined us. Zuliism is here. I'll get to his comment in a second. Revolution Management says, okay, going back to this Chase Dillon character in Underground Railroad. He played a character that helped capture runaway slaves. He depended on an oppressor for his life and was given his freedom. Okay, so that was the character that he played. Okay. Revolution Matron goes on to say, Africa was born in me. Although I was not born in, nor have I been to Africa yet. Right? KW Don 7 says the Boers can and never will be African, especially with all of the atrocities that they have committed against our family in Azania. Absolutely. Zuliism says shit must be destiny. Shit must be destiny. This can't be real. Right? This must be a fantasy. Right? It's hard to take some of this stuff that we see from our own people. Right? You wouldn't allow Haiti into the African Union, but you have Palestine and Israel. Two groups who would oppress us and exploit us in a minute. But a proud group, a group to be proud of, Haiti, you say no to them? Come on, man. In fact, all of the 6 zone countries should be in the AU. All of the Caribbean should be. Right? Revolutionary Matron says we need more African narratives. We will not convince them all, but we'll better educate some. Some are our people. I agree with that. We got to get more into, if you're on the Discord, you'll see Revolutionary Matron talks about that on the Discord. That we need to start putting out more propaganda, more narratives, more positive talking points, more information, right? To be able to get more people, right? And those who have gotten the information, who we know have gotten information and still ain't doing anything, you forget them. That's my take. I say you try If they don't take it and they still on that bullshit, forget them. Those people who pick up what you're putting down, those are our people, right? Azulism says, did they forget that they neutered black immigrants in Israel a couple of years back? Goes on to say, when the Arabs came to Africa, they destroyed it, right? These are your observers, historical observers. The Portuguese were observers, right? And they observed their ass right into that land. Right into that land. And so, to unfortunately answer the matron's question, yes, that really happened. And to add to that, it's clear that our people on the continent especially, we have the wrong people and the wrong mindset, as illustrated by this guy Tosin Adetola, right? Like, he's completely on the bullshit, and you put a guy like him in power somewhere, ooh, forget about it. Them being observers is a joke. In fact, if he had his way, right? And that's the issue that we're dealing with. Just to wrap up this Tosin thing, the pro-black perspective also commented. Amma Bookman commented as well. You guys should check out Amma Bookman too. Amma Bookman's comment was, descendants of enslaved Africans have had centuries of white people trying to strip us of our identities. So many diasporan communities risk their lives trying to preserve their traditions. Having a continental African do the same work is hurtful. It's the insensitivity for me. And by the way, it's these kind of guys who the ADOS and the FBA cherry pick and create this narrative that there's this huge rift between all of us. Someone from Amma Bookman commented and said, he's Nigerian, ignore him. And she rightfully said, why would I ignore someone just because he's Nigerian? 1/6 African is a Nigerian. 1/6 of Africans are Nigerian. What kind of Pan-Africanist ignores a sixth African? How does that make sense? Right? Someone else came and said some continental Africans be gatekeeping, policing Africanness when it comes to the descendants of enslaved Africans in the diaspora, but people ain't ready for that. Whew. This is where we get the nonsense from. Who else commented? So the pro-black perspective commented. I hope this doesn't take any steam away from his show in the future, but I'll just go through it quickly. He says, I think I'll just block this person, and I have to agree with it. For the record, quote unquote, the African experience isn't limited to the continent. The diasporal experience is as African as the continental experience, but it's a different side of the same experience. You're not more African because you were left. Ooh, that last sentence is nothing but a word right there. You're not more African because y'all were the ones left behind. And we're not less African because we were the ones captured, kidnapped. Goes on to say, and by the way, this is why you have to be around intelligent folks. Look who the people who I'm reading who commented on that dumb shit. Look at the intelligent responses that are coming. Right? Onitase goes on to say Africa experienced an invasion, and in that invasion, some of its children were stolen and abandoned. The stolen children had their own branch of experiences, and they abandoned another. But neither is more or less African. You dolt. To say a European living in Africa isn't having a European experience, but an African experience, is to misunderstand what Europe is. And it's frankly race-betraying talk. Goes on to say it's okay to be foolish, but foolish and arrogant is reckless. I hope this helps someone. I will change that and say I hope this helps everyone. Don't be a dummy all your life. Revolutionary Matron says we have no friends. What is it that we do not understand about this? So Zuliism says, I'm ashamed, bro. Gotta give those Cro-Magnon credit. They not playing. That's a serious statement that Zuliism just made there. Right? You gotta give these cave beasts a lot of credit, man. Reluctantly, though. You would think, and that just goes to show you how African we are. You would think that the experiences that the enslaved dealt with would have them spewing that type of rhetoric on a more consistent basis. Well, guess what? Continental Africans went through similar oppressions, and so we see similar shit from them. Revolutionary Major says gatekeepers are the things we need to talk about at the kitchen table and in the shed. F a pocket watcher. Watch my pockets. My heart and my mind are in check. Yeah. So to answer, to bring it back to the topic of Israel now is an observer, here's a question I have for you guys who are live with me right now. And I know there's a delay, so I'll wait for your responses. What do we think happens next from Israel? And remember, Israel is backed militarily by the US. What do we think happens next from this so-called Israel becoming observers of the continent now? Clearly, Africans don't recognize the saying, you need African solutions for African problems. And I'll add to that, you don't need no white boy looking over your shoulder either. Right? What do you guys feel will come of this observer status? What do you guys feel will come of this observer status? Someone else said to Onitase's comments, you don't argue with these people at all. And I actually want to address that while you guys answer that question. Well, I see Derico Cooper Photography is with us. See, we have some lurkers who come out sometimes, like myself, I guess. But peace to Derico Cooper, good to see you here. Right? The pro-black perspective seconds what Derico Cooper Photography just said, more colonialism. Right? So we're gonna have a new colonizer, clearly. We're going to have a new colonizer, clearly. We'll have a colonizer competition between Israel and China, right? Clearly. Right? It's such a shame. There was something I was saying, I clearly forgot. Oh yes, I want to address this notion. So me personally, I'm a person, I engage folks, most of the times I engage folks based on the makeup of the person that I would be engaging. If I look at you and you're a clown ass person, I lose my impetus to engage you, even if you're dead wrong. There are times though where you have to engage stupidity, and you gotta correct it. And like Onita said at the end of one of those tweets, I hope this helps someone. That's why you have to engage it, especially in this kind of social media space. You can't let folks say dumb shit like this and saunter off into social media sunset. There has to be fierce opposition to this, because you don't want some younger African to come across that tweet and start thinking about it and F around and start thinking about it in line with this Tosin character, for this example. I'm not one to run on with people. I'm not going back and forth with you too long. But you have to make these points. You have to get in there and make these points and let these guys know, dude, you are a gatekeeper essentially for colonialism. Your mindset, if that becomes contagious, Africa will be lost completely, and you guys will claim that these folks who you've lost Africa to are the real Africans. I get we have this thing with who's born somewhere and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, when it comes to that continent, you cannot be out here talking about Europeans who are observers to culture and may partake in some fringes of the African culture. You can't be out here talking about their African people. I saw someone respond to that tweet and say, nah, this fella's supposed to be offed. Like someone said that on Twitter, and they didn't say offed either. They used the K word. And I really can't put up a fight against it. You wouldn't get much struggle from me. Right? The pro-black perspective says nothing good. You invite trouble to the table, you get trouble for dinner. Rico Cooper Photography says the financiers want to be hands-on. He also says peace, family. Peace to Rico Cooper. Revolutionary Matron says Israel has a plan that spans multi-generations. This is an attempt to recolonize Africa. The South Africans have had videos for months that are against giving the African his land. Revolution Matron says offer equals going to the shed. Right? At one point, this guy who they got up out of the leadership in Israel, Netanyahu, right? He had proposed at one time this Africa-Israel summit. Do you guys remember that? He tried to propose an Africa-Israel summit. I think it was supposed to go down like in Togo a couple of years back. But they end up canceling it, right? Because, there was internal strife in Togo, number one, and number two, some African states actually did have a problem with it. The idea was that Netanyahu was hoping that he would be able to get support, right? Because this is what it's about. he was able to, because when he addressed the Africans, he mentioned pointedly that there's 50 plus countries in Africa. And what he really was trying to do was, he was trying to get support for Israel, right? Because of how much spaces Africa has in the UN. And he's trying to get African countries to support Israel expanding in that area where they are with Palestinians. Right? That's one reason why they're there. But who knows what else that they have in mind when it comes to Africa's resources in the future. I think Netanyahu had a close relationship. I think it was Kenya. Was it Kenya or Nigeria? Does anyone know? It was either Kenya or Nigeria that Netanyahu had this relationship with. Right? But the first step is they want to try to go and oppress the so-called Palestinians even further. Right? And Africans can't see this a mile away. You mean to tell me a little bit of paper, a little bit of bread, a little bit of money is all that it takes for our folks to sell out not just a person, but whole communities, nations, a whole continent? It's wild. It's wild. I hope I covered that topic. Is there any other comments you guys want to drop for that comment? That's going to be the last comment for the night. I'm going to do a station ID. You guys post your last comments in the meantime. And on the other side, I'll read the last comments and wrap up the show. All right?
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Yes, indeed. Make sure to check out those shows, including the Revolutionary Matron. Also support some of the folks who are here in the chat room. Check out Dorigo Cooper Photography, Revolutionary Matron, Pro Black Perspective. Check out Daily Affirmations by Pauline. All right. Pro Black Perspective says, great show and welcome back. Sante Sana. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, brother. I'll be on your live tomorrow. I might be lurking, but I'll definitely be there live in attendance. So thank you guys for the topics. As always, you can go to the Discord. There's a channel there for Shoot the Breeze topics. Post your topics. I will, put them together and I'll read them on next week's Shoot the Breeze. Again, whenever we come together in this live stream format, especially with Shoot the Breeze, it's always a good time because we get to talk with, we get to speak with one another. And in the future, I'm going to actually stream on the Discord so that you guys could join the voice channels. And some of you guys could actually voice your thoughts instead of typing them in the chat. Dorigo Cooper Photography says, back in 2007 when I was in Afghanistan, I remember reading in military news that the place where Western forces would be operating and occupying in the future would be Africa. There you go. There you go. Daily Affirmations by Pauline says, good night, everyone. Good night to Daily Affirmations by Pauline. Let me just shout out everyone in the room. Daily Affirmations by Pauline was here. Tamika Cooper Photography was here. The Pro Black Perspective was here. Revolutionary Matron was here. KW Dawn 7 was here. And Urzuliism was here. If you were here and I didn't shout you out, I apologize, but I do think I caught everyone. If you were lurking behind the scenes, I appreciate you being here. Make sure to like the video, which it seems like everyone has. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll be back on Tuesday. So you guys make sure check me Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you. Till next time, peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.